This is the School Leadership Show, the only podcast dedicated to helping practicing and aspiring school leaders improve their craft. The School Leadership Show brings together thought leaders from inside and outside of education to deliver you the insights and tools you need to succeed in school leadership. In this episode, I interview Nicola Giardina about her brand new book, The More We Look, The Deeper It Gets, Transforming the Curriculum Through Art. Nicola has a very cool approach to using the arts to get students to think deeply about lots of different concepts. And she has this really interesting pyramid of inquiry as kind of a framework for how to approach looking at the arts. And as has become the trend here recently on the School Leadership Show, I've been letting the guests choose the intro and outro music. And Nicola picked a very cool song, Blue Nile by Alice Coltrane. So I hope you enjoy not only the intro and outro music, but also this conversation with Nicola Giardina. Welcome, Nicola Giardina. How are you?
I'm great, thank you.
Thanks for joining me on the School Leadership Show. We've been talking a little bit, even before we started recording, about your brand new book, The More We Look, The Deeper It Gets, Transforming the Curriculum Through Art. So I loved your book. I've already told you that. Can't say enough good things about it. But do you want to tell folks a little bit about your background and how you came to write a book about getting to curriculum through art?
Sure, thank you, and thank you for having me. I started my career, I was a painter, a studio artist, and I came to New York City and began working as a teaching artist. And I loved that work so much, being in the schools and supporting students, helping them learn skills to express themselves through paint. And I went back to school to get my master's in art education and began working at a school in the South Bronx in New York as an art teacher. And so I transitioned eventually from being in the classroom to museums. I really fell in love with museum education.
Yeah, how did that happen? So how
that happen?
Yeah, that seems like I don't know, is that an abrupt transition out of schools into museums? Like, how did that all work?
So I attended in my third year of teaching a professional development session that was hosted. It's called Connecting Collections, and it's still going on now. And actually, I'm one of the facilitators now, which is a great honor. It's hosted by the Metropolitan Museum of Art, the Guggenheim Museum, and MoMA. And they do every summer in July, they do a week-long program for educators. And it really attracts educators from all over the world. So it's a wonderful community. And you spend the week immersed in these different arts institutions and learning how to engage with art and engage students with art. And so once I became a part of that community, it was very profound for me. And I felt like being in the museum was something that I longed for as an art teacher and someone whose life had been immersed in art and then made this transition into the school system. So I had these two passions that I wanted to bring together. And so museum education was really the way for me to do that.
So you get into museum education and obviously start having some success with it. And then where did the idea for the book come from?
So I was the teacher services coordinator at the Brooklyn Museum for many years. And so my role was supporting teachers and integrating the art into their curriculum. And then from there, I went to the Metropolitan Museum, where I was brought on to lead this grant-funded project called the Astor Educator Initiative. And we had a very generous grant from the Brooke Astor Foundation. And we worked over 3 years. We worked with 45 schools, and we worked with teachers, visual arts, social studies, and English language arts teachers, all from Title I schools, District 75 for students with special needs, and District 79 alternative high schools. So we really had a great mix of students and teachers in the program. And our purpose was really to reach underserved schools and schools that also had low arts access. So we brought in all of these schools and we worked with them very intensely over the period of 3 years. And one of the wonderful things about this program was I got to spend hundreds of hours in the galleries of the Metropolitan Museum of Art with all of these brilliant students who just, for many of them, it was their first time visiting the museum. And the teachers were bringing them to the works of art and asking them to talk about what they think, how it connects to their lives, and supporting them in these conversations that really develop higher order thinking skills. And so that's where all of the transcripts in the book come from, is really, I wanted to share these conversations with teachers. And so I have so much to say.
No, but
so,
I think that's a very natural. So you kind of came into it sort of naturally, and then it sounds like your theory, kind of your, I don't know if I'd call it a theory of action, but your pyramid of inquiry sounds like it derived from all of those observations and hearing those conversations that teachers were having with kids. Can you say more about that pyramid? I thought that was a really articulate and concise way of really showing the whole process.
Thank you. So the Pyramid of Inquiry was really born out of these hundreds of hours in the first year of the program, where I was listening and I was observing this arc of the conversation. So the Pyramid of Inquiry is a very simple framework that teachers can use to connect works of art to any subject area, any topic. And it's really like Bloom's taxonomy or Webb's depth of knowledge. It's a scaffolding of higher order thinking. So it begins with observation, really having students notice what they see, and that's the foundation. And then moving toward what they think about what they see. So they're starting to make inferences about their observations and support that with evidence from the work of art. So, and then moving from there, the teacher can give information about the work of art that connects to their curriculum. And from there, students move to interpretation. So what the work of art is really all about. And that's really when they synthesize the information about the piece with all of everything that they've gleaned from the painting thus far. And so they're really entering into this very high level of thinking. But they're doing it in a way that's very joyful and engaging.
Well, and as I look in your book, this chapter 9 is the last chapter, right? And you have a bunch of great questions for each of those different levels in the Pyramid of Inquiry. Like you did the observation questions, you have observation activities, really things that I think can help make it a little less daunting for a teacher. So I was a high school math teacher, and I took my obligatory one art history class as an undergrad, and I can't draw. Art's intimidating for some people. So how do you get those teachers who maybe they've never even spent any serious time in a museum? How do you get them to be less afraid of the art, I guess?
Yeah. Well, that's a great question, and yes, it's true. There is a fear in our culture of art, and
it's intimidating.
So intimidated, and all of this research shows that people spend about 30 seconds looking at a work of art in the museum. You go to the museum, you look for 30 seconds, you read the label, and then you're like, okay, I get it, moving on.
Yep.
And we're missing out on so much richness and connection. So the way that, and I do, and a lot of the teachers in the program, a lot of the teachers that I work with don't have experience with art, and so I really embrace that. And we start with observation, and that's really what it is, and that's the reason why that level is so critical, because everyone can answer the question, what do you notice? Right? It's a very non-intimidating question. What do you see? What do you notice? What stands out for you? Right? All of those different variations on really slowing down and just observing. And then from there we can build. And I usually premise my conversations with students and with teachers by saying there are no right or wrong answers. I'm gonna encourage you to support your ideas and your thoughts with evidence from the painting. We're going to be using the painting as our foundation, but I really want you to share your unique way of saying it because, I sometimes I teach from the same work of art with different groups and it's a completely different conversation. And that's really the beauty of this approach is that it surfaces, what's going on with us in that moment and the individual people that you're speaking with and how they connect.
So when you work with teachers and students, do you typically do pre-work with teachers? Like, do they receive some sort of professional learning experience from you, and then it's okay, now bring the kids in?
Yes.
Yeah.
It works in a lot of different ways, but usually, yes, I like to get the teachers involved. So I'll start with an inquiry discussion. I always start with an inquiry discussion about a work of art and bring them in, and I encourage them to just participate as themselves and experience the work of art. And once they do that, then we reflect and think about how is that for you as a learner, and how might that work with your students, and what specific scaffolds might your students need to engage in this kind of learning. And then from there, when I'm working in depth with the school, I'll go into the classroom and I might model for the teacher, have the teacher watch and observe me teach with their students. Because this method, it works for all students. It really does. I work with nonverbal students with this approach. I work with, all such a different range of English language learners, students with many special needs. And this process, you can really tailor it to the group. So I'll do that, and then I'll invite the teacher I'll guide them through the process of creating an inquiry-based lesson using these resources, and then I'll come into their classroom and then they teach their students, and I provide feedback for them.
Okay, so this is all happening. This isn't happening necessarily at the museum. This is happening at the school.
I do both.
You do both.
Okay.
Okay.
So I also train teachers at the museum, and I encourage them and I give them the tools to bring their students to the museum because, you would be surprised living in New York City how, maybe you wouldn't be. Maybe it's not surprising to me because I'm like, how can this not be the center of your curriculum? But it's underutilized. The museums, I feel like, are
I think it's like that in every community, and that was going to be one of my questions. Was what about? I mean, you're in New York. I mean, you have access to all kinds of museums and art and culture. We're in upstate New York. We have, we have some museums. Through the local university, and we have galleries and stuff, but I mean not on the level that you folks do. And then I think about, what about the people who are living in very rural parts of the country who, it might be 2 hours, a 2 hour drive to a city with any sort of art. Like, what about that? I mean, what do those teachers do?
Well, in the book, I really intended this book to be for teachers to use in the museum and or the classroom, right? So I really think, and I've seen in schools, if you have a smart board, or even if you have access to color copies or postcards or reproductions, you can really use this in the classroom. It doesn't, the museum visit is a wonderful privilege to have. But this method can be also very powerful in the classroom. And that was part of what I did as well in my work with the Met, is I traveled to all of these schools all over the city, and I would bring them works of art. So I'm kind of working on amassing like a little collection of things that I get from museum gift shops, or just, and the novelty of bringing in objects that students can touch and feel and engage with and sketch is huge. So I would encourage teachers in rural areas to, just try it out in the classroom. And they did an interesting study. The Crystal Bridges Museum of Art did an interesting study a few years ago about the impact of a single visit to a museum. And it was very, very profound, especially for students who who were first-time visitors. And what they managed to retain from that visit was really, really in-depth. So more, they're doing more studies now about, what is that impact of even one visit. But there's a lot of, there's definitely evidence that it's a hugely impactful thing for students to have that experience.
So, as you've been working with teachers over the course of
Mm-hmm.
the last many years, what are some of the biggest surprises or aha moments for teachers as they've engaged in the process themselves and then watched and guided their students through the process? Where do they just like, oh wow, I just can't even believe what?
Okay, well, this happens all the time, and this has happened in all of my museum work. A class will come to the museum, or a teacher will put up a work of art in their classroom, and the students start talking, and the teacher will just look at me and just express shock because they'll say that student has never spoken in my class before, and now they're giving these long articulate answers, right? So there's something about art that it really awakens, in students, in all of us. It awakens something. And I think because there are no right or wrong answers, it really frees something up in students, right? So, we know when we're asking students recall level questions that a lot of the students get really shut down, right? You already know the answer, so why are you even asking me this, right? So they don't want to respond. But when you're really asking them what they think, and without any pretense, and just engaging with them on that level, they really, really open up. And I've had teachers, I had a teacher last year at a District 75, a school for students with severe special needs. I went through a training with her, and she said to me, I didn't even realize that I was expecting so little from my students in terms of their thinking. And this really opened up something for her in terms of, not even, it just opened her mind in terms of what's inside of her students that she's not even accessing. And I think that's something this method brings out.
And that's a well-researched phenomenon of, students really not receiving grade level appropriate rigorous instruction, particularly when you get to students with who come from economically disadvantaged backgrounds and students with disabilities. So and I think you're right on. I mean, everybody has an entry point when it comes to observation. Everybody can make some sort of observation, and then I think that's why your model's so powerful, because you start there where everybody has an entry point and then move them along.
Yes, and it's a gradual process. So, when you talk about rigor, it's like that can sound, it can sound so intimidating, but this is I call it a joyfully rigorous process, because once you get the students hooked with the observation and the works of art that they want to connect to, it's like they don't even notice that they're thinking. And the title of my book, The More We Look, The Deeper It Gets, it came from a student. It's a quote from a student he was at an alternative high school, and they were talking about this work of art, and the students were so engaged, and he just kind of burst out with, the more we look, the deeper it gets. He was just so, it was such a beautiful moment, and I feel like it really encapsulates what this work is about.
Absolutely. I just totally lost my train of thought. Oh, well, keep going. So talk more about experiences with teachers and kids. I'm really curious. You mentioned a little bit before about how the studies around one visit to a museum do you see a difference in the level of conversation or the depth of conversation in a classroom versus at the museum? Or can you have an equally rich experience in either place?
That's interesting. I think that there is something powerful about the museum space and seeing works of art in person. There definitely is something that shifts the dynamic, and that's for anyone, right? If you looking at a reproduction of a work of art is not going to be the same as seeing the brushstrokes and being in that environment. So I will say there's definitely something powerful about being in a museum. And also, we in the year that we worked with high school students at the Met, we gave them a survey before and after the program about their comfort level in museums, how they felt, their attitudes about museums, and we did see this really remarkable shift from the beginning of the program, where many of them hadn't been to a museum before. They had a lot, they would say things like, "It's not for me," like, "It's cool, but it's not for me." And then by the end, when they had grown such a comfort level in the museum through having these experiences where they were really asked to, tell us what they thought and engage with each other, they had some really powerful responses. And to me, that's very important, because so many students, so many people feel like, oh, the museum is not a place for me, right? It's a place for rich white people, right? It's not a place for me. So to me, that's very important. However, I do think that there's a lot that you can do in the classroom. And even when I come into schools, I bring a stack of postcards, a stack of art postcards, and I'll lay them out on the tables, and I'll invite teachers and students to choose one that resonates with them. And even that simple prompt really brings the room to life in a different way. So I think that there's a lot of potential for working in both spaces.
Well, and I'm glad you mentioned that, because that was going to be one of my questions, is how, if you're going, I do a lot of professional development too. And sometimes if you're going to work with a group, or you suspect that the group might be particularly averse to what you're trying to do, you might change the materials that you bring.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have a go-to period or genre or something where you're like, even the toughest group, even the biggest, like, worst people who don't like art, I can get them with the Degas? Or like, what do you do? Do you have some go-to ones?
I have my go-to works of art that I know people are going to get into. So I look for works of art, and I talk about this a little in the book when I talk about selecting works of art, right? Some works of art are going to really provoke a great conversation. Other really on their own, there's not much that you have to do as an educator. And then there's some works of art that you're going to have to...
What's a good example of something that would just evoke
a ton? Winslow Homer's The Gulf Stream. Okay. So that's a painting that I include in the book. And I also included a dialogue of high school students talking about it. That painting, which is at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and if you're not, should I describe it since we're...
Yeah, a little bit.
Okay, so if you're not familiar with it, it's a painting. Let me look at it right now so I can be accurate. It's a painting by Winslow Homer. He painted it in 1899, and it's a black man, and he's in a rudderless boat. He's at sea. He looks like he's in the middle of the ocean. There are waves on either side of the boat. The mast is broken. He's kind of lying on the boat and looking to the side, and right in front of him are these sharks with blood, basically dripping from their mouths. And then in the background, there's like a little water spout. The sky is very ambiguous. It's cloudy. And then in the very, very background, there's this tiny shadow of a much larger ship.
Oh, yeah. I didn't even see the larger ship.
Yes. So that is what the process of inquiry is. There's always a moment where the teacher, someone discovers the ship, and it just completely changed the conversation. And actually, Homer added that ship after he exhibited the painting, because people thought this painting was so depressing.
Like that there was no hope.
He added a little ship. And what's wonderful, there are many things that are wonderful about this painting. There's a really deep history of the images that he was using, it connects to the socio-political everything that was going on at the time with Reconstruction in America and the African American experience at that time. And he painted it the year that his father died, and he was very close to his father. So there's a lot of emotional content, there's a lot of political, historical content in the painting, and it's extremely ambiguous. So you can really read it as a hopeful painting if that's where you are. You can read it as a very, there are many ways that one can interpret it, and that's what makes it really rich for inquiry.
So, and I think, to your point about a powerful experience in a museum, so we're looking at, in your book, the size of this picture is what, like 2 by 3 inches or something, about 2 by 4.
Yes.
2 by 4.
Yeah.
So, but the actual painting is big. I mean, it's a good sized painting, right? It's over a meter wide.
Yes.
And so I can imagine seeing it big and in person has to have such a profound effect on people. The other thing that you mentioned in the book, which I thought was really fascinating, and I think is something that gets overlooked, particularly by the people who don't want to believe that their kids will get anything out of art. And what you do, and you weave it in nicely, you don't really hit people over the head with it, but the idea that you're bringing in other information. Like what you shared about this painting, the context of the painting, something about what was going on in the author's life when it happened, what was happening in the world around this author at the time. How is that reflected in the painting? Like, I think that lends an element of depth and legitimacy that is hard to argue with when it comes to the value of art in the curriculum.
That's so interesting. Yeah, because to me, art is not disconnected from anything in life. If you go to the Metropolitan Museum of Art, you're seeing the span of human history and culture, and it's all connected to the people that it came from, the political context, the historical context, right? These works of art were made in context, and so when you engage with them, you can engage with them on many levels, but you can connect them to anything that you're teaching your students.
Nice. So I want to be sensitive to your time. So where can people find out more about you and the book?
So you can go to my website, nicolajardina.com. And that if you visit my website, there's information, there are links to the book and to find out more about the book. And also my email address is on there if anyone would like to contact me. Perfect. I would love to talk about this.
Oh, I could talk all day about it. And I'll make sure I put that in the show notes. And
Great.
Then since this is, how about, are you on social media too? Can people get to that through the website?
I don't do social media.
Good for you.
No, I'm on LinkedIn.
Okay.
So they can look me up on LinkedIn. I think I'm the only non-Italian man with my name on LinkedIn.
So that's pretty funny. So this is I'm going to kind of take us off the track a little bit. So this is a podcast. It's a show for people who are either school administrators or who are aspiring school administrators. And I love the conversation we had today about teaching and learning. I mean, so super cool. And I'm a big fan of art, and I often have to drag my family members kicking and screaming into museums. But I don't know.
Try the Pyramid of Inquiry.
I might have to. I think, well, the next time we're in New York, I think I want the personal guided tour for my family and me, and you can help us out a little bit.
Sure.
But, so thinking about, talk a lot about productivity and a lot about helping people try to do their best work. Do you have any little things that you do to be more productive that,
For myself or for teachers that I work with?
For yourself, like just anything, any tips or tricks or hacks or things that people might not think of?
Oh, that's interesting. Okay. Let's see. I have a routine. I'm a very disciplined person. I have a routine. I try to stick to it. So that helps me.
Like a routine around what?
A routine around, structuring my work, right? So I make lists. I make copious lists, and I try to kind of go through those things. And I make time also, and I make time for myself to continue to be inspired. So it's easy for me to kind of only do this work in service to others and to teach others about art, and that gives me so much. But I also try to take time to look at art on my own, to continue to have that relationship, to that primary relationship. I think that's important for me.
That's very cool. And I'm always curious too, particularly with creative people. What system do you have for kind of capturing and holding on to new ideas and information and thoughts that you have? Because I feel like the older I get, I can't remember anything. Like I need some sort of very David Allen, getting things done, that whole thing. Like, what's your trusted system for not losing stuff?
Google Drive. I just capture absolutely everything. It's a little unwieldy, but I keep everything there, and I'm always adding to it. And I try to so even though I don't know exactly where it is, it's in a Google document somewhere in there, and it helps to contain that for me.
That's awesome. So, yeah. Nicola Giardina, thank you so much. This was a great conversation, and I love that I got to talk about art for a half hour. That was a lot of fun.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Thank you. Thanks for listening to this episode of the School Leadership Show, a podcast for aspiring and practicing school leaders. Send your comments, questions, and show ideas to me, Mike, at schoolleadershipshow.com. And please consider rating the podcast in iTunes and leaving a comment. And definitely pass the show along to your colleagues.